All right, so today I wanted to kind of explain the Path of Exile passive skill tree in terms that Diablo players would understand. Because when you look at the skill tree in Path of Exile at the first glance, it seems very extreme, but when you actually start breaking down and we're going to do this in Diablo 2 because I don't have a capture card, so we can't do it on PlayStation, on Diablo 3 or anything. So we're doing it on Diablo 2 on the PC right now. But what I wanted to do is basically I'm gonna break down how the Diablo 2 skill tree is very similar to the Path of Exile skill tree. It's just condensed into less choices. But in terms of abilities and things that each skill point does, it's basically equally as massive technically. Maybe it's a little less, right, because it is an older game, but the way I see it is if we, for instance, look at the skill tree on my paladin here, we have three basic lanes, which is predetermined by the developers. So you have like lane 1, lane 2, and lane 3, and you have three different skill tree tabs, each with 3 lanes. So basically we have 9 lanes to choose from. Each lane has its own set of skills. Usually they are themed around something. In this case, these are themed around defensive auras, and then you have offensive auras, and you have combat skills, which is pretty self-explanatory if you ask me. But so to really break down some of these skills, right? What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna bring up this page here, which is basically the skill tree, right? So if we look at paladin skills, we have combat, defensive, and offensive auras, right? So once we click on that, we have the icon for the skill, the name, and then we have some effects, character requirement level, and a couple other things, right? But also we have the what each level basically does, and that is how we're gonna break it down. So I'm gonna jump into Path of Exile here, open up the skill tree, we're gonna look at it, and then I'm gonna kind of explain why I think this is equally as hard to like figure out if you really want to min-max and you really want to understand what's going on. So let's get into the Path of Exile skill tree real quick. Alright, so here we are on the Path of Exile side of things, and this is your skill tree. And this looks very intimidating at first glance, but as you can tell, the only parts that I am invested into is we can like basically draw lines, right? So we can draw a line from this point to this point, and then basically down to this point, and here, and here. And then that's the side that I have chosen to spec into. And when we start looking at the different nodes here, each little node, so you have a starting point. This is my starting point. This little node gives you 14% increased damage, plus 14 to mana. The next one, 12% increased damage and 10 to mana. And next one is elemental damage, elemental damage, elemental damage, right? So now let's bring out the Diablo skill tree here. What happens is instead of you having a set lane that you have to go down, you kind of still have that, right? You have a set starting point, but instead of you, or kind of like Diablo had 3 lanes, basically when you start here, right? Or you start right here, either or. So you only really have 2 lanes here. Each lane then splits into 2, so you can go up, or you can go this way. And from this one, you can go in here, or you can go downwards. So that part is fairly similar. Now, next part would be talking about all the little like nodes here. So if we look at the first level of Smite, it gives you 15% damage, and it stuns for 0.6 seconds. Now, if you imagine that this one that says 15% damage is the same node you have right here that says 10% elemental damage, right? I know it doesn't say the same thing, but if you imagine a Diablo skill tree where instead of you having to put 20 points into this one thing, you get to choose which of these things you want to put points into. So it lets you customize your own skills a lot more than Diablo does, where it's kind of like forced upon you to choose certain builds. Now, when it comes to Diablo, you can totally break your builds. Basically in normal, you can break your build so bad that you can't get out of normal into nightmare because the build is so bad. The best way to kind of show off how you would do that, because this is something I have personally seen 100 times over. If we take the sorceress, since the sorceress being one of the most popular build in the beginning, if you choose to put 1 point into each one of the skills, right? So let's say we put 1 point into Ice Bolt, 1 into Frozen Armor, 1 to Ice Nova, 1 to Ice Blast, 1 to Shiver Armor, 1 to Glacial Spike. We put 1 into Blizzard, we put 1 into Chilling Armor, Frozen Orb, and Cold Mastery. And then we go, oh, we want some fire spells as well. And then we put 1 in each of the fire spells, and we go, oh, we want some lightning spells. We put 1 in each lightning spell. Now we have 1 point in each one of them. And basically, once you get to the end of normal, none of your skills do any real damage. The reason behind that is what's called synergies. So if we look at the cold skill here, for instance, when you look at Ice Bolt has its own synergies, right? So a synergy means that once I put a point into this, a hard point, not a skill point you get off your gear, but once you physically put a hard point in, up all the way up to 20, each time you do that, your Frost Nova gets 15% cold damage per level. Your Ice Blast gets 15% cold damage, Glacial Spike gets 15% cold damage, Blizzard and Frozen Orb gets 15% cold damage per level you put into this skill. And as you can see, these different ones, they synergize with each other. So when you go down and you find Ice Blast, now Ice Blast synergies are Ice Bolt, just like Ice Bolt synergies was Ice Blast. So now they affect each other and basically boost each other, right? So whenever you put a point in here, now you're getting 8% more damage on the first skill, where we basically could say we have already maxed this out, so this is already giving us a bunch of extra percentages to our Ice Blast. Now both Ice Blast and Ice Bolt gives percents to, for instance, Blizzard. So if we max those two skills out, we are gaining a lot more percent damage on our Blizzard. And if we then also max out Glacial Spike, we get more freeze length, like the monsters will be frozen for longer. And all of these synergies, they boost the Blizzard damage to go higher and higher and higher and higher. And the same with Blizzard, it also has percent damages to Ice Bolt, Ice Blast, and Glacial Spike, right? So that is very, for new people, not the easiest thing to understand. A lot of people make the mistake of thinking I can just put a skill point wherever I want and it doesn't really matter, but it very much so matters, especially in this game. You can real fast ruin your own character. Back in the day, that meant you had to start over a new character. Nowadays, you can get respec tokens and respec your whole build. But all of these little things, like extra damage or duration or whatever, each one of these, if we look at this, right, there's 20 little square boxes here, times 2. So that's 40, right? That's a lot of that's a lot of little nodes, you know what I mean? That's basically 40 nodes, and we have what is it, 124 nodes, I believe, or is it 125 nodes? at the end game, when you're max level and you've done all your side quests and everything, I've done everything with this character, and it's currently max level. So I have every single skill point unlocked, and I'm pretty sure it's like 120 or 130 or something like that. And if you're kind of like looking at it as a Diablo 2 skill tree, that means that would be 3.5 skills, technically, right? So that would be you maxing out Ice Blast, Ice Bolt, and Glacial Spike, or getting Glacial Spike to level 10. Now you have basically put 100 and some points, or you have gotten 100 and some different little square boxes here of different modifiers that has changed your damages and your skills in certain ways, rather that be longer freeze, more burn, whatever it is, right? So the thing about Diablo is there's no freedom in the builds, really. Everything is predetermined by developers, and it has a set path that they want you to take. What GGG did is they took all of these different skills here and they picked them all apart, and they were like, why do we force people down specific roads and say you can only use Glacial Spike if you max out Ice Blast and Ice Bolt and Blizzard? Otherwise this skill is kind of useless. It doesn't really provide the damage or the freeze or whatever you're looking for. So for that reason, there would be no point in maxing this out if you're a fire build, right? Like you would go for all your fire skills instead. You would be going hard on these and maxing out like Fireball, Fireball, and stuff like Meteor and Hydra and Fire Mastery, for instance. That would be 100 levels or 99 levels already. So that's not a lot of different skills, but they do provide a lot of different modifiers and a lot of different little stats, changes to the build, changes to the skills, changes to everything, right? So this is a very convoluted, because it's not super obvious at first hand the amount of effects that you get out of doing these things, right? Whereas in Path of Exile, what they did is they took all the characters. So if we look here, there is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 characters with each 3 skill trees, and each skill tree has 3 lanes, so that's basically 9 lanes per character. Now all of a sudden we have like a lot, right? If you're looking at it like that, we have a lot of different things happening all at once here. Whereas in Path of Exile, the choices are a lot more customizable, and it's a lot more up to you to choose, would I really want my Glacial Spike? Do I want to use this? And I want to use a fire spell, for instance, right? In Path of Exile, that would be totally fine. You would definitely be able to do that, right? Whereas in Diablo, it's a little bit harder to kind of like really customize your build, and that's why it's a common theme that everybody has the same items on the same builds and the same points in the tree, and everything is completely 100% alike. And in Path of Exile, what you'll find is a lot of people create builds of the same character, but it's vastly different what they have done with the skill tree, the items, and everything, because there's room for more customization, and the choices are up to you way more than it's forced lanes you have to follow, right? The only thing that's really enforced here is each of these characters that you can start out with has a set start point. So this round one that has the green, the blue, and the red one, these are all similar, these round circular things you're seeing here. Each one of these is represented by a different character. So no matter how many times you start a Templar, you'll never start a Templar and then magically end up over here. You will always start from this one point. And if you choose to be a witch, you would always start from this point. There's no like, okay, this time you're starting down here, next time you're starting over here. There's nothing like that. It's always a set point to start from. You have a set starting point, and from that point, you choose which direction you go. There is, as I said, there's to begin with 2 choices, and next time there's again 2 choices, and then it's a little bit more linear to the next point up here, where there's again a couple of choices. You could go down this way, you could go straight down, you could go up, you could go this way out here. But it all comes down to what type of skills you're using, because this tree doesn't provide the skills that Diablo does. Diablo has the skill, and then it has the skill has its levels. Each level gives that skill a certain set of bonuses, and it gives the bonuses to other skills as well. In Path of Exile, we are choosing our bonuses ourselves. So in certain situations, it might be better to have intelligence, or it might be better to have strength, depending on how you're building your build. So when we determined how to build a build, that comes down to what kind of skill you're using. And the thing about Path of Exile that is a lot better, in my opinion, than Diablo is the room for customization, the room for you, for letting you pick something you really like, and then sticking with that throughout the whole tree and your whole build, your gear, everything. You can basically theme everything around certain things that you really like. So a skill in Path of Exile is basically coming off of a gem instead of being something that I press on my passive or on my skill tree. Let's say this one, if I press this one, I don't get a skill that's called discipline and training that I can then walk out in the world and shoot. There's nothing like that. All of the skills you see in my skill tree right down here, or in my active skills right down here, they all come from these gems, which is basically something you can either find or you can purchase them, and they have different themes. There's intelligence skills are blue, dexterity skills are green, and strength skills are red. So very simple, themed around each type of attribute, right? And then you have a couple of white ones. And white ones are simple. They go in any type of socket, whereas a blue one only goes into a blue socket, a red one only goes into a red socket. But as you can tell on my weapons here, they have all white sockets, which means that technically you could put any color gem in here. It doesn't matter. You can put a green in here, you can put a red, a blue, whatever you want to. If the color is determined already, like a blue or a red or a green, then you can only put a blue gem in a blue socket, right? And just as you can level up your skills in Path of Exile or in Diablo, you can level up your skill gems here. Now these does give you a range of different stats, but besides those stats, they also connect to each other. So if I have something that has it's called a support skill. So you have your primary active skill you use, and that skill can get supported by another skill, and it can actually get supported by 5 other gems, right? So each one of these gems provides something that benefits the Ice Nova, right? This basically gives you lightning damage equal to 20% of unreserved mana. So I have no mana reserved, so I'm getting 20% of 10,000 as lightning damage from this one gem. So even though this is a ice or a cold skill, it now does lightning damage, right? So for that reason, when we go into my skill tree here, stuff like increased lightning damage and increased cast speed is providing me more damage, and I'd be able to cast my Ice Nova faster. It's very similar to Diablo in that way, but it's just split out in lesser choices here, where there's room for more customization. Like, it only gives you 10 intelligence. There's no other benefits from this one point. There's no synergies that it synergizes with. There's no nothing, right? But a notable like this one that has 2 skills on it, for instance, it has increased lightning damage and it has cast speed, both which benefit my build. One provides me more damage and one provides me the ability to throw my skills faster. So again, I will basically have a higher damage output from it. Now, if we took all of these little squares from every single skill tree in each one of these, and we split them out, so put them out on one big screen instead of they all like instead of they're all just a 3-lane choice. Now you're putting everything into one. You're taking all of these different characters, all the skills and all of the little things every skill did, and you plug it into one big tree, and you then say, okay, you might start as a witch right here, and you might choose to go this direction right here, and then you can go down directly past where this guy starts. Basically, you could go this direction out here, you know what I mean? Like, you can go wherever you want to go, whatever benefits your build, but it also allows you, instead of you having to use let's say Ice Bolt with a sorceress, now you can use Ice Bolt with the Templar, you could use Ice Bolt with the Witch, you could use Ice Bolt with the Ranger, which would be like the Amazon, right? It doesn't really force you to do something specific here. Here you just get the gem you really want to, with the skill you really want to play with. In my case, this is called a Ice Nova Frostbolt, so it's basically like a big nova around me, and then it fires these round bubbles. So the round, let's see if we can get them to fire the round bubble. The round bubbles are the ice bolts, and the nova is this white circular thing around me. And what happens is, if I press my little balls, the spheres of Ice Bolt, then the nova gets used, but on top of the ice bolts instead of on top of me. When I'm pressing here, you can see it's like on me, but now if I'm pressing this one, it's following the bolts out, right? So you could, if you wanted to, be on any one of the characters that are in the game, and then either one of those characters could technically put this skill on and use it. It might not be the best choice because of let's say you start in the ranges section, and everything you're getting, for instance, projectile damage, attack speed, evasion, and attack damage and global evasion. None of these are super beneficial for the Ice Nova. Well, you could technically say the projectiles are somewhat benefit to the Ice Nova, since the Ice Bolts is technically a projectile, right? It's a spell projectile and it's cold. So this would basically benefit from that, but it's not really useful. So when you look at this specific skill, you want to kind of like figure out, okay, where on the tree, what piece is the best starting point for me, because this area provides me with the utmost. In this case, it would be spell damage and elemental damage, and cast speed and mana is the main parts that I look for in this build. So that's why you're kind of seeing that if we start going deep on it and look at it, everything is something to do with those themes, right? You have mana, maximum mana, damage recouped as mana, there's some life, more mana, elemental damage, what do we have here? More mana. What do we have here? We have more mana, energy shield, armor, intelligence, and regenerate life per second. There's just so much room for customization here, but a lot of it isn't really themed around the same things. If you notice it, right? It's this is life and energy shield, because both life and energy shield is also something that I kind of use. So all of my damages that I receive is now split between my mana, my life, and my ES, due to some of these different points inside of my ascendancy, which is this little circular thing that you can open and close. It's basically a miniature skill tree that provides some quite interesting and very different types of points. And some of them are exceptionally powerful. This one being probably one of the most powerful that is in the game. I don't know if I'm talking out my ass here, but I feel like this is one of the most powerful. So it gives you endurance and power charges, which is what we have up here, and it's always sitting at 5 no matter what I do. I can never lose these, and what they do, if I hover over them, it says players gain additional physical and elemental damage reduction for each endurance charge they have. So since I have 5, I'm getting 5 times the elemental and the physical damage reduction from these. And then you have the power charges. Player gains increased critical strike chance for each power charge that they have. So since I have 4, I get 4 times more critical strike chance from these. So that 1 point is very, very, very powerful and useful for this specific build. Now, in terms of Diablo, we had some items that was insane, in my opinion, in Diablo 2. And I'm not saying insane as in insane bad, but I think it's still to this day one of the best itemization systems that's ever been created in any type of game ever. Just because the sheer fact of how much different items can affect things and how some items can be a complete build just off of these few items. A perfect example is the paladin I was just on, was a holy fire paladin, which is basically gaining its holy fire from the armor, the weapon, and the shield. So those 3 things is a must-have. If you don't have those 3 things, you don't have the build, right? In here, it would be a little bit different. Instead of you having to have those 3 items to make the build, here you would more so say, okay, what gems in terms of skills am I looking for, right? Do I want the Ice Nova, and what type of supports do I want for my Ice Nova? And there are certainly some things that are more useful than others, but it's fairly simple, because if you're looking on the left side of the screen right now, next to where it's with a square that popped up explaining the skill, there's a little square that says supportable skills, and here you can see if it has a red X, this specific support skill won't support that specific skill gem because of it being non-compatible. And then you'll see some of them have a little green mark, which is the ones that this one will function together with, right? So for instance, it says Frostblink of Winter Wheat Blast. So this would go with this one, right? Like if I put that in the second space here, this would actually do what it says. It would support skill and penetrate 20% of lightning resist on the enemies, right? So it's very similar, but very different, because the similarities is definitely the amount of different stuff that's happening, right? Like there's a lot of different things happening, but here it's just compressed into one press. Like you only press this one button 20 times, like that. Boom. Now you're done with that skill, you go next skill, right? And here it's way less of the mindless choices and a lot more of mindful choices. So you can really specialize your build into something that is just very focused in on what you like to do. And the thing about this skill tree, even though it looks kind of insane when there's so much, it's really a lot less than you think it is. Because if we were to basically divide the skill tree we could divide it into 3 sections, and you could like make 3 big pizza slices, kind of go like this into the middle, and then up this way, right? And then you have intelligence. That's your intelligence tree on the top here. So if you are a build that heavily relies on getting a lot of intelligence, then chances are you're probably not going to want to be on the dexterity side of things, and you're definitely not going to want to be on the strength side of things. So that's how the tree is basically cut into 3 big pieces: the intelligence, the dexterity, and the strength. And then on top of that, you have a starting point, as I said, for each character. And there's of course one character that is a little bit outside of the others, which is the Scion that starts right here in the middle. So with the Scion, you have a little bit more starting choices, right? Because we're just starting right here, so you can go in each one of these directions as you feel like it, depending on what type of build you're trying to create. But I won't go too deep into the Scion and why that is a little bit different. I just really wanted to explain this in a way that when you look at it, it seems a little less overwhelming, because when you really start going deep in the Diablo skill tree and really want to understand what's going on, even though it's only Diablo 2 here, it's so hard to understand. There's so many things that are not obvious. There's so many things they don't tell you. Breakpoints for faster cast rate, breakpoints for resistances, breakpoints for damage reduction, breakpoints for faster hit recovery, breakpoints for all of these things are completely invisible. Nobody tells you that there are even breakpoints for these type of things. This is all stuff that you basically have to either watch a build guide to figure out, or you have to basically wiki it, right? Like you have to actually Google it to figure out what is actually happening. And I don't think you should be intimidated by the skill tree, even though it's big. I think you should look at it like this. You should zoom in to the starting point where you're at, like this. And you should look at a skill tree like this. This is my skill tree now, right? We do like that. This is it. Now the choices became a way less, right? There's only really a couple of choices now. But when you're zooming it all the way out and you're looking at every single character's starting point, this looks insane. It looks like this one character can go wherever the fuck he wants. But technically, you can't really go wherever you want. You do have a limited number of points and a limited number of choices to get to certain spots, right? For him to start here and get to right here would be really hard. It would be a lot smarter if I wanted this large jewel socket right here. It would be a lot smarter going upwards, right? Because there's less space between the starting point and this point, like the starting point here and the point up here, compared to going all the way on the other side. So and this is of course for only most builds, because there are certainly also a couple of what do you call that? There's a couple of times where it's not 100% true what I'm saying, where it's actually possible to like do something, but for the most part, look at it like, okay, we're starting here and we're going in either one of these directions, up or down or out. There are certainly some people who do some crazy stuff and they'll like go, let's say the starting point is here, they'll go like I've done here up to the skill point here, but they won't take any of this stuff out here. They'll go here and then they'll go down to the next jewel socket and then all the way down here to the next jewel socket, and maybe they'll go on the top up here all the way over here to this jewel socket, because these provide you something that's better than what you're basically getting from the rest of the tree. That can happen. There are times when those jewels are just more useful. So for instance, they come in different sizes, and as you can tell, let me grab that one and then we'll go right here. So there's basically 3 different sizes for these cluster jewels, and each one of them has an ability to roll passive skills on it, and the passive skills always provide you with a couple more stats than just the +2 energy shield or strength, right? So in certain absurd cases, people will go around just to get these cluster jewels in there because they can provide a lot more for the build overall. But when you're starting out, that's really not something you want to think about. What you want to think about is kind of just figuring your way through the starting point here. And in which direction you would like to go, and what you want to theme your build a lot like around. Do you want to theme it around being fast? Do you want to theme it about high damage? Is it a cold, lightning, fire, or minion, or physical, or whatever you want to do? You gotta kind of discern, okay, is it better if I'm doing a heavy hitting, dual wielding, super high life type character? Do I really want a lot of intelligence, since intelligence is giving you mana and energy shield? No, I probably wouldn't want that. I would probably much rather want to get strength because it gives life and melee damage. So instead of me going up this direction and then up here in the intelligence area, you would probably go downwards this direction and then go down in this area down here instead. And of course, there are always some rules that can be broken in certain ways. As you can tell, I'm kind of dipping into the strength area, but the main reasoning behind that is a 2-part reason. First and foremost, you do need a little bit of strength for certain things, especially for like red jewels, right? So for me, I have to have 100 strength in order to use this spell, right? So if we look at we go close here, we can look at my strength right now. Currently I have 145 strength, 159 dexterity, and 411 intelligence, right? So if we back right out here, there are gem slots, like jewel slots in your tree, which you can put a gem into. That's something that's very different from Diablo. There is nothing like this in Diablo. But what makes this even cooler is the ability to change certain things and to add certain things or remove certain things, or just change something completely from one thing to another. So as you saw when I put this in, it provides a ring around the area. So if I pull it up again, and then quickly we're going to look at this one. It says unwavering stance, cannot evade enemy attacks, cannot be stunned. It sounds really good, but that's not what I want this point for. The reason I want this point is when I put this specific jewel in here, this has a specific name. So there's 4 different names for this red jewel. Each name, so this one is called Name of Doriani, but each one of these names provide a different choice down here in this big notable, or keystone as they're called. So instead of being unwavering stance as it was before, now it's called something completely different, and it's giving you a completely different outcome. Now it's doing 50% of non-chaos damage taken, bypasses energy shield, gain 15% of life as extra energy shield. So if when I take this out, you can tell from my energy shield drops by 1,000, right? So I'm getting more energy shield. Am I getting more life? I'm losing a tiny bit of life, but I'm gaining a lot more energy shield. And what happens here is, normally, if it's not chaos damage, it wouldn't penetrate directly into your life. It would take down your energy shield first and then start taking down your life. Now, since it allows for energy shield to be penetrated at the same time as life, basically, now I can take damage and it will take down my ES, but it'll also take down my life. But since I am taking a lot of my damage, let's see if we can find one here. I don't fully remember. Here, so 40% of damage is taken from mana before life. Now you combine that with the keystone down here that it can bypass the energy shield. Now it will it'll take 40% of the damage over here and 60% over here, so 30 on the energy and 30 on the life. So now it's kind of like spread out across multiple pools of health, right? Like my mana is my health, my E is my health, and my life is my health now, basically. All right, let's back a little bit out here. And then if we start looking at the different points that I have into these trees, you'll see a common theme will be 10% of damage taken is recouped as mana, but I'm already on 40% of the damage that comes in goes to the mana pool, so it starts going down, but then 10% of it is now recouped as mana. So it's like working against each other, and it's basically giving me even more life, because now I'm getting mana back. Every time I'm getting hit, I'm getting mana back, and that's part of my life pool. And that's what I mean when I say you can customize your build in Path of Exile much more. But in the end, if you look at all the different things that's happening when you press this one button, there's so many different things happening. You're getting damage, duration, bonuses. So if you condense this, or if you didn't condense this, but you broke it up and you said, okay, this is 1 point. From now on, every time you want to get some damage to your Nova, you could say it's not even 15%, it could be 5%, right? So let's say that Nova skill was, do we have one that has 3? We have one that has 3 right here. Let's say the Nova skill was 5% damage, right? So instead of you pressing this one and getting 15% damage, now you break it apart and you say, okay, Frost Nova, we do it like this, we put it right here. So now this one says Frost Nova gets 5% increased damage. This one says that, and this one says that. Now it's a choice. If you want to push your skill tree towards getting Frost Nova damage, right? But maybe you don't like Frost Nova. Maybe you are much more in tune with Blizzard or a Frozen Orb. Why would you then try to do something with Ice Nova? Because it doesn't really benefit you if you're much more of a Blizzard player or a Frozen Orb player. So then maybe you rather want to go to the Frozen Orb section, and let's say this was the Frozen Orb section. Maybe you rather want 10% damage here, and 5% damage, and 5% damage, and 5% damage to Frozen Orb. If you start looking at the tree like that, and you start thinking about how much shit is actually happening, and then think about that you don't really have a free choice when it comes to Diablo. Everything is preset. There's no real customization like that. You can watch one of my videos on Diablo, like a build video. If we go a little bit down here, you would find a couple of build videos. For instance, if you watch my Blizzard build video, 99% of people are going to be using the same skills, the same gear, the same charms. Everything is going to be the exact same as mine. There's no real there's no massive variations. There's not a Blizzard barbarian, right? Or a Blizzard druid. It just doesn't really work that way in Diablo. If you were playing Path of Exile, that would be a choice you would have to make. Do I want to be a sorceress that has an ice attack? Do I want to be a Templar that uses ice attacks, right? Or do I want to be, maybe I want to be a ranger that uses ice attacks? Because that's totally possible if that's what you want. If you like playing this character and you like this skill, it's not like, okay, this is a barbarian skill, so now you have to play a barbarian. You can't play your assassin, or other way around. This is a paladin skill, now you have to play paladin, you can't play the sorceress because the skill doesn't scale on the sorceress like it does on the paladin. Once you start looking at the skill tree and the gems like that, and you start understanding what GGG actually did here is basically taking Diablo, taking all the different parts of it and breaking it up into choices that you have to make, and choices that kind of like is free to make it, instead of you being forced down this. Now you're free to choose which ones you really like, or some things you don't like, you don't go for, right? Whereas in Diablo, you are sometimes forced to take shit you really didn't want to take just to get to that next point, right? They don't really do a lot of that here. It's a lot more open. It's a lot more customizable. It's a lot more free in terms of what you want and what you like. That's what's really making this an exceptional game, is the freedom of choice is exceptional. It's incredible, and there's so much of it. I don't think that I have ever sat and looked at this and been like, the first time I looked at it, I was intimidated, but after I looked into it, so I spent, I would say, like a couple of hours just reading every note that was, everything that was on the tree, to just kind of like get an idea of what choices do I have here, what is all of these little things. And the more you look at them, the less intimidating they become, because the more you realize, okay, there's only really like a couple of stats happening here, whereas in Diablo there is a lot more happening, right? In one press you're getting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 plus 7 to 10 different things happening at once by pressing one button. Here you actually have to press the 7 to 10 buttons technically to get the same effect out of it, right? Especially because certain things, if we look at this, it says minion deal 15% increased damage. That does nothing to me. I don't have any minions, so that doesn't matter at all. I'm only taking this point, technically, to get to this point, right? But this is the point I really want. And this over here is what I really want, right? Because this reduces my mana cost, and it gives me more mana. So in order to get to this one, the smartest direction and the thing that helps my build the most would be going this way, like this way down here. I could technically go down like this, accuracy, and then this for dexterity and some more cast, and this one for some more cast. But these choices were better. I rather want a higher life pool with more life, which means I can take more damage. Then I want to get some accuracy, which I don't use because I'm not shooting a bow or like hitting with a sword or an axe, so I don't really need accuracy. The cast speed is nice, but everything else is kind of useless, right? Dexterity is kind of nice, but at this point I'm set with dexterity. I have the amount of dexterity I need, so there's no point in me trying to push for more dexterity. Mainly because I get my dexterity off my armor, for instance. I have 48 dexterity on my armor itself, so now I don't have to focus as much on taking these little dexterity notes here, even though there's plenty that I could actually go for if I really felt like I needed those. But once you start out, really just slow down, take it easy, don't be intimidated whatsoever. Look at the things and realize that it's a lot simpler than it seems. And then once you get to the true end game, that's when it becomes a little bit more complicated. But to get there, it's really not that complicated. That's a small learning curve, and I would bet you that you have never bought a game, sat down, and at the first 15 minutes been the best player in the game. This rarely ever happens. Most people, they have to play a game X amount of hours to get comfortable with everything that's going on. Like they, at that point, they know it all. Let's say Call of Duty. When you jump in a new Call of Duty, all your guns are level 0, everything is new, all the points of interest is new. You've never ran around this area before. So if you get into a gunfight here, compared to 3 months down the line, you might lose this gunfight right now because you don't know the area, you don't know the guns, and nothing is leveled. Now, 3 months down the line, you've been in this area 110 times. You have your guns maxed out. Everything is familiar, so now it's not nearly as high of a likelihood that you will lose that same gunfight because you are very familiar with everything that's happening. The same thing is going to happen here. This is basically like looking at a city map over a city you've never been to before. That will always be like intimidating and look confusing and like a little bit, oh my god, I have no idea where anything is. But if you then move to that same city and you live there for 3 years, now every part of that city is like your back alley. You know it inside and out. When you now look at a map, everything seems so familiar. You can determine, oh, that's where the library is, this is where the gas station is, this is where my supermarket is, and I live right here, right? And that's basically how you should view this. This is your map. You're living right here, or maybe you're living right here, and you're trying to get your way to the supermarket, you want to get to the gas station, and you kind of want to get to the library, and then you want to, you know what I mean? That's how you should view it. It's really not that intimidating, and it's really not that bad. It's just a question about trying to not look at everything at once. That's why there is a zoom button. It's so you can really like go close and be like less focused on everything else, and you can just focus in on that area you're in right now and be like, okay, what am I doing right now? And now they do have the Respec tokens in Diablo 2. In Path of Exile we have something we call a regret orb, which is basically like a refund token, right? So if you look up here, I can refund 36 points. What that means is if I press my refund button, I can choose any given point that I don't want, as long as I can't choose this one, right? Because it's connected with this one and connected with this one. So if I want to remove that one, I have to remove the previous ones like that, right? Now it's gone. I'm going to press cancel, right? Because I don't want to remove them actually. But let's say that you wanted to kind of like completely remove all your points. Well, you would just want to get a bunch of these, and every time you use one of these, as you see, the number goes up. The amount of refund points I have keeps going up until I used all of them. Okay, now we have 76, and as you can see, I have 1,112. So it's not a resource that's scarce, right? Like this pretty common resource. So if you wanted to, you could skill the whole tree differently 10 times over, no problem. It's not needed because this is kind of like perfected in a way where I don't want to change anything right now because everything is working perfectly. I'm doing extreme high damages and I'm really just plowing through the game at this point with this build. That's what it comes down to. I hope if you're a Diablo player that you do give the new Path of Exile a massive chance. Don't jump in the game, play it for 5 minutes and hate on it. Try to give it a serious chance, like I did with Diablo 4. I played it for 100 hours before I said, I'm never playing this again. I played Diablo 3 around 1,500 hours before I went, yeah, I'm never playing this again. So I gave those titles a massive chance before I made that choice. I really put an effort in. I really learned the game. I really kind of like looked at what was happening and what's going on before I made my choice. Please, for the love of God, give this thing a choice or a chance once it comes out, the new Path of Exile, right? If you're not one of the people who are 100% convinced that this is for you, don't spend the $30 and get the game right now. Just wait till the day it comes out for free. Give it a serious chance. Try to get your mind kind of like freed up from the Diablo situation, and then try to like have an open mind and think about it like this. You're gonna be able to customize what you want to do a lot more here than you have in any other game that's available that is in this genre. There's nothing else in this genre that has the customization abilities that this game does when it comes to gameplay, how the skill tree works, and how the skills function, and how much freedom you have to kind of go in different directions and do different things with one gem or with one skill gem, right? One skill gem can be used on multiple different builds at multiple different starting points. It really depends on how you like to play. And instead of you being forced down the rabbit hole of you have to play like this, you have to choose this, you have to go this direction, everything else is bad. That's how a lot of things happens in Diablo. Is when we look at Diablo 2, there is a abundance of skills that's never being used or barely ever being used because they just are way less effective and useful and good and powerful in comparison to a lot of the other skills. In this skill tree, it's very up and down in terms of what's useful. It all revolves around how you like to build, what you're trying to achieve, instead of it's just generically bad, right? It's just no matter whatever you do, you would never use this. There's just no chance you would ever take the mind over matter, because mind over matter is just bad. You can't build a build using mind over matter. There are skills like that in Diablo, and there's quite a bit of them if you really start looking into it. Where here everything is a lot less or not less, right? It has a lot more what do you like I think they thought everything through way more here, which is very obvious because they have said themselves they took Diablo 2 as an inspiration, and then they continued on the thought process of Diablo 2 and developed something that had that flavor but was much more much more had much more freedom of choices and a lot more customization. That's basically it. It's basically the Diablo skill tree just broken apart. Every stat has been broken apart. Every benefit you get or every decrease or whatever, it's all been broken apart, and it has been given its own point that you now are allowed to assign to your build. So I really, 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 really hope that was a explanation that makes sense, where you're not completely out in deep waters when you're looking at it and thinking this is impossible, I will never be able to do this. Don't have that mentality. Please do not have that mentality. Be open-minded. Take it as it comes. Don't be intimidated. Just try it out and give it a significant chance. Give it a real chance, and then come with your conclusion if it's something that has piqued your interest and if it's something you really like. Now, that being said, I will be streaming Path of Exile 2 once the early access begins. I will do my best to create some builds and some guides for you guys in case you do want to try out. And I'm also, as I said, I'm going to be streaming every day, so if you want to just run along with me and see like what I do, and you just basically copy me and do the same thing, you're very welcome to do that, because I'd rather see you just copy me the first time around and then next time you do something for yourself. I did the same exact thing when I started out playing Path of Exile. I was not the type of person that just jumped in the game and magically knew everything and how it worked. First time I made my first build, which is this build right here, I made it to level 89. I didn't complete my Atlas. I didn't do any of the big bosses. All of this shit wasn't there, right? Like I basically made it through the campaign, right? Like the 10 acts, which is basically not really 10 acts. It's more 5 acts and then 5 acts again of the same type. is pretty much how you should view it. It's basically like normal to nightmare, if you want, in terms of Diablo. But yeah, so this whole build, although it looks way better now, it's because I have basically swapped out a lot of gear here in order to make it a lot better. Because when I started out, this was really bad, right? Like this has been a really bad build to begin with, and it still kinda is bad. At least when we compare it to the same build I built after that one. So that was my first experience of ever playing a game. It didn't go extremely well or anything. I didn't become the best player or anything. Then this is my second build. It's the same build as the first one, which is level 89. Now this time I hit level 100. I maxed out the levels. I got all the skill points. I got most of the best gear you can get. And now it all of a sudden performed way better. And I looked into a build guide to understand what skill tree or what skills I want to put into the tree. I looked into what made the build good. I started reading a bunch about it, and then I realized, oh, this is so much better the way I have it set up now in comparison to how it was set up. And then after that, I was like, yo, let me out. This is basically what you would call an AoE build. So this has like massive AoE damage, but it's not good with single target damage, right? So I was like, okay, now I have this AoE big damage, kill the whole screen type of thing. Now I kind of want to build something that's a lot more focused on just killing a singular enemy, like a boss of some kind, right? Then I built this Necromancer. And after having this build, starting to max it out and have the most stuff that I liked on it, I was like, okay, let me try something different, because I was I was asking chat if there was a build they thought I should really try, and the suggestion was this Hexblast Mine. So this is basically my third build. I made this, and I was like, okay, yeah, it's cool and it's not too bad and stuff like that. I didn't personally, I didn't get as invested into this build as I did the three others, because it was just a little less enjoyable maybe for me personally. I didn't like the playstyle too much, so I preferred the other three. But then I built this Righteous Fire, and Righteous Fire is technically Holy Fire when we go to Diablo. So in the Diablo Paladin skill tree, Offensive Aura, and then we go down to Holy Fire. And Holy Fire has on level 1, it has a radius of 4 yards. It does 1 to 3 fire damage. But if we go up on the deep end here, you can see now it basically got a lot bigger. Like the area of effect with damages got a lot bigger. And currently mine is level I believe it's level 60 or 70 or something like that. So you can imagine how big the radius is on mine. It's off screening everything. So I usually I can't even see them die. I just run towards a pile of enemies and they're already dead when I arrive there. Like they just got killed off screen crazy. That is technically kind of like this. It's just less AoE, right? But it's the same effect. It's a ring of fire that's around you, and when an enemy steps in the ring of fire, basically they die, right? So kind of like similar. And after having built these 4 builds, then we had the new league, which was Necropolis. No, sorry, this was Necropolis League. Then we got the new league, which was Settlers. And in Settlers, I decided to start out with this build, which is basically like a Blizzard sorceress type of build, right? And I was like, oh, this is so great, and this is by far one of my favorite builds. And then after that, I viewed something we call the Gauntlet, which is a competition between players where we're basically racing to the end who can kill all the bosses fastest and stuff like that. I saw the guys who were at the top of the leaderboard, they played this character, so I built this character to kind of see what it felt like. I wanted to try it out. And where the previous league had focused a lot more on learning the Act 1 to 10 grind, learning the map grind, and how to level up. On this Settlers League, my main focus was crafting, and I really wanted to learn how to craft basic items for myself instead of having to go and trade for them. Now I'm able to kind of make my own gear instead of having to go trade for it and get it, which I did on the first time around, and that was it took a lot of time to accumulate all the gear because of course it's more expensive if you want to go purchase a piece of gear instead of making it yourself. A lot of times it will be more expensive purchasing it. But now that I've kind of gotten into the crafting side of things, the builds has become a lot better and a lot more effective. And now on this new Necro Settlers League here, as you can see, I'm currently just got the one guy here, but the reason behind that is because I just wanted to kind of start out, and this is basically the same exact setup that I started out with in the previous league. So we are again using the Ice Nova, which is what I was just using over on the other one, so the one with the bubbles that shoots the Ice Nova. And this build, because I liked it so much, I went, let me try and make this build, and now I want to like push to get to end game as fast as I physically can. Now you saw the other gear was kind of crazy. It had all white sockets, like all the things was maxed out. They had all the best stats on them that you could have. This, on the other hand, has all the worst shit that you could imagine. Like everything is super bad, right? Like all the stats are terrible in this build. The damage are fairly low compared to the other build. It's like a tenth, maybe less than a tenth of the other build. The survivability is less than a tenth. I don't have 10,000 mana. I don't have 5,000 energy shield. You know what I mean? Like it's just less survivable, less damage because I don't have the gear for it. But that doesn't matter because I was still able to do all of these massive end game bosses that are really hard because now I had already done them a bunch of times and I understand a lot of the movesets. I understand a lot of the attacks and damages and stuff, what to look out for, what to not get hit by, and stuff like that. And that's because I chose to cut it into small sections at a time and just focus in on one section at a time. This time I want to learn the Act 1 to 10. This time I want to learn Act 10 to Endgame. This time I want to learn crafting. This time I want to learn building. This time I want to learn something, whatever it might be, bosses. This time I want to learn this mechanic in this league, for instance, or whatever it might be. Try to take a little theme and focus in on that one thing and kind of like learn it, right? And once you've learned it, it does take a little bit of research often to kind of learn. But I think a lot of things, games, politics, even if you want to cook some food, it takes preparation. You need a recipe. You need to understand how to season. You need to. There's a lot of little things that goes into it. But once you've cooked the lasagna 4 times, it's not like you need the recipe to cook it. It's just, it's in you. Now you know the recipe by hand because you have done it before. This is the exact same thing. You do it a couple of times and it becomes everyday normal. Like nothing is different. Nothing is crazy. It's all just becomes more and more enjoyable because you start understanding more and more about what's actually going on, right? And my suggestion is definitely take your time. Don't rush anything. Try to really focus in on learning something instead. And then once you've learned certain aspects of the game, it makes fucking everything 100% easier. Understanding what makes a build good, what you want to scale, what you want to build towards or want to build away from or against or whatever. That's really what you want to focus in on the beginning. But yeah, I have been talking for a long time. I hope this kind of made sense in a way that a Diablo player is looking at it and thinking, okay, this is not so fucking bad. This is really not that bad. But yeah, leave a like, comment, and subscribe for staying in tune with what's gonna go down over the next year or so, because it's gonna be crazy coming into Path of Exile 2. There's going to be a shit ton of content to put out there, and there's going to be a lot of time to use. So I look forward to seeing you guys on stream, or to come back to one of the videos and let me know how you have done. I really want to hear from you guys, so keep your head up and try to not get too intimidated, and I will catch you all in the next one.